Back on the football field tomorrow, Duke gets ready to take on Northwestern in their third game of the season. What can we expect? We talk about that on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with Jase Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us on this Friday, September 15th, 2023, as we're getting set for the third Duke football game of the season tomorrow when the Blue Devils take on Northwestern. Locked On Blue Devils is a daily podcast devoted to everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. Basketball season right around the corner. We'll have plenty of those conversations throughout the next few weeks as well. On today's show, really excited to have my good pal Steve Wiseman from the Raleigh News and Observer joining us here on the program. If you have not done so yet, please be sure to follow us on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils. Follow me there as well at _JJ_Jackson_. Also, make sure that you take this opportunity to follow and subscribe to our podcast for free wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Without further ado, let me bring on my good friend, the aforementioned Steve Wiseman, who's kind enough to join us here on today's show. Steve, thanks for the time today. Football is here. We've seen about 8 quarters of the Blue Devils so far. Hope you're doing well.
I am. It's been a good start for the Blue Devils, hasn't it? You couldn't ask for a better start for them.
No kidding. I mean, the win against Clemson on Labor Day and then following it up, taking care of business the way that they should this past week. Before we even get to Northwestern, yeah, it has been 8 quarters. That's the sample size that we've had thus far for Duke. How would you assess their play?
Yeah, I mean, you can only give them an A at this point, right? I mean, I can't give them an A+ because they haven't been perfect. They've won 2 games though. I mean, the things that they're concerned about obviously are some of the fumbles. They've had 3 fumbles already they've lost, which I think last year they only lost 4 for the whole season. So that was a part of last year that was such a great turnaround, was the fewer turnovers. So it hasn't cost them yet. They've won both games, but I know it's something that the staff is emphasizing with the players. And they've had some pre-snap penalties, which you expect to see kind of early in the season. They had 7 in the Clemson game. They cut it down to 3 against Lafayette. One of them was on a field goal, which allowed Lafayette to get a touchdown instead of a field goal. But anyway, those are things that they want to fix up. But there's so much more they've done really well. I mean, Riley Leonard's off to a tremendous start. The running game is producing. The defense has only allowed 2 touchdowns in those 8 quarters. So that's really strong. We're seeing better play in their secondary than we saw last year. So I think overall it's been an incredible start. They're number 21 in the country. And, they're going to be favored here for the next couple of games and have a chance to really do some special things.
You've known Riley Leonard in Durham now for 3 seasons. The entire country is getting to know about him a little bit more, given, of course, the big win over Clemson. More expectations going into the year. He's now a top 5 quarterback prospect when you look at that 2024 NFL draft that's looming. It's so far away, but that's conversations people love to have this time of year. I mean, what have you thought of Leonard's play so far and just that exact idea, Steve, that all of a sudden everyone is starting to sort of chatter about the play of Duke's quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things about opening with Clemson on that big stage where you had a TV audience of 4.5 million people was Duke could showcase itself and show how far they'd come as a football program. I mean, the opposite side was if they had lost the game or played poorly, it would have said, well, that's same old Duke. But now it's not, right? So now people are looking at not only the program, but then Riley Leonard as one of the top quarterbacks in the country, which he played like that last year, but it was kind of under the radar because they didn't have any big, marquee games until they got to the bowl game maybe. And that's where people kind of saw, okay, that's a bowl games get big audiences. People watch those, scouts look at them. And now we're seeing him listed as, a top NFL, maybe a first round pick for next year, which if you think back a year ago, he was barely a starting quarterback a year ago, right? You go back to August, he wasn't even a starting quarterback in 2022. So Riley's he's an interesting kid. He's a special kid. He's a very smart guy, and his attitude is really good towards everything. And it's been a joy to cover him the last couple of years and see what he's going to do this year, and then going forward into what's going to be a pro career. It looks like.
Yeah, when you look at his career thus far, and this season so far, obviously those are heightened expectations moving forward with Riley Leonard at that quarterback spot. And you talk about what he's been able to do. The numbers aren't necessarily eye-popping, although I will say, Steve, a perfect passing day this past week is pretty impressive in itself. But I mean, just thinking about expectations that might have been placed on him and the stats that we've seen so far, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean that he's managed the game well. He's not putting the ball in danger like we always talk about that with past Duke teams and quarterbacks. That's his job is to maintain things. He ran both times in both games against Lafayette and Clemson at the end of the end of the first half. He ran an efficient 2-minute drill to get them down in position to score. Now, both times there was a fumble. Both times there were fumbles that cost them that opportunity. And then against Lafayette, I guess it was a missed field goal by Topolino. But they got down there. He ran it well. That's my point. Is those are pressure situations that the scouts look at, that coaches look at, to where if we're in this situation, we need his points to win the game. He has been successful in both times. Now, that wasn't the case in those games, but coming forward, there's going to be a time when he's going to need to do that, and he's shown he can do that. Again, his ability to run the ball is impressive. So yeah, he's doing what you want to do as a guy as a returning quarterback in the system.
Yeah, you look at his play so far. I guess the only thing that really matters is those 2 wins. That's the one stat I think that everyone is pretty fired up about there in Durham for sure. So we'll continue to talk about Leonard and other players on this Duke football team after we take our first time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like such a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors, as LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Moving forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, JJ Jackson alongside my pal Steve Wiseman from Raleigh News and Observer. So, Steve, we take a look at Duke getting set for their second game of the season, taking on Northwestern, a Power 5 opponent for the Blue Devils coming to town this week. The defense, good start to the season, only giving up 7 points in both games. What type of a performance will it take from Duke this weekend on the defensive side of the ball?
Sure, absolutely. They've got to play smart, not give up the explosive plays, not hurt themselves with penalties. They are the better team on Saturday. They've, I think they're an 18-point favorite at this point. It opened up as 20-point. Duke being favored by 3 touchdowns over a Power 5 team. That's some heady stuff, isn't it? But I think that they they got to get after the quarterback some like they can. Northwestern's a pretty good offensive line. They're a Big Ten offensive line, even though the program's kind of in disarray right now. But they played better last week against UTEP than they did the previous week when they lost it at Rutgers on a hot day in New Jersey. So they maybe got a little worn down that day, but they came back and played well against UTEP. So those are the things Duke's defense has to worry about. And they've been okay. They've given up some yards. Duke's defense has, but in the red zone they've been really tough, and they've not given up points. And I think the staff focuses more on that points per game allowed stat is what really matters to them. They don't really care about the yards. I mean, this is modern day college football. Offenses are designed to get a bunch of yards, but you got to keep them off the scoreboard, and that's what Duke's done best so far.
Yeah, let it get all the yards that you want, but we saw in that Clemson game, by and large, inside the 10 a few times, and Duke walks away from that game with a victory, and again, only giving up that one touchdown set up by the Calhoun muff punt. So speaking kind of to that defensive performance that Duke had at Clemson, I mean, big expectations going into the season, question marks knowing that, hey, it's Tyler Santucci. This is a new defensive coordinator. Elko's always had his hands on defenses throughout his entire coaching career. But, man, new players on the outside in the secondary. Like, personally, going into the year, Steve, you might have been in the same boat. I think you're more confident about the offense, don't really know what to expect out of this defense. And here we are feeling great about that 11.
And part of that was in the secondary in particular, Al Blades and Miles Jones, the two transfers they brought in, Al from Miami and Miles Jones from Texas A&M. They're older players. I think Al Blades is 25, playing college football. But Miles Jones had been hurt a lot the last couple of years, but he played for Elko previously when they were together at A&M. And we didn't know what we were going to get from them, but they're bigger athletes. They're bigger guys that can line up with, you know, the kind of athletes that Clemson throws out there at wide receiver and lock them down, right? They can do that. And so that's made a huge difference. Jeremiah Lewis coming back from Northwestern as a transfer who'd been at Duke previously, you know, kind of flipping back and coming in right before camp started. He was the defensive player of the week, defensive back player of the week for the ACC in that first week against Clemson. He didn't play against Lafayette because he has a broken thumb and he's in a cast, but he's going to play with the cast this week against Northwestern. It looks like they sat him out against Lafayette. But anyway, those three guys have made a huge difference in that secondary. And then you add in, you know, Brandon Johnson, a returning guy. Chandler Rivers has gotten better. The tackling, particularly in the secondary, has been spot on, where there's not a lot of yards after catches, and that's been a big key for Duke's defense.
What about the linebacking unit? Shaka Hayward was a name that we were used to seeing for so many years. Cam Dillon, Dorian Moat, we've got the names. We've known them throughout their time thus far on Duke's campus. But again, the 8-quarter sample size out of the linebackers, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Cam Dillon had the targeting against Clemson, so he didn't need to play the whole game against Lafayette. So that hurts him a little bit there. But, you know, Dorian Mossy has played really well. He had the interception against Clemson late to kind of seal that game. Yeah. He's been a guy that has been kind of dinged up a lot over during his career. So far, he's been healthy, and he's playing like he knows it, like he knows what he's doing. So Trey Freeman's in there, a kid from Durham who played some as a freshman last year. He's getting a lot of playing time this year as a sophomore. You know, Santucci, not only is the defensive coordinator, but he came in as the linebackers coach. So their strong play is a reflection of him. It's another sign that he's doing a really good job, that it was a good hire for Elko, because you're right, that was a question mark coming in because of losing Shaka, and it's really worked out well.
Okay, so third game of the season, still in non-conference play, although Duke does have that one ACC game under their belt already. Another home game for the Blue Devils at Wallace Wade Stadium to open up the year. Ultimately, how do you kind of see this game playing out, Steve? What are your eyes on in regards to the Duke football matchup with the Wildcats?
Yeah, I'm going to watch how Duke can run the ball on offense, if they protect the ball, if they don't have the pre-snap penalties that we talked about earlier. And Duke's offensive line, which, you know, he's shuttling a lot of guys in there. They've had some guys that are a little banged up from camp already. So going into the Clemson game, the number one concern was, can they block Clemson? Well, it turned out they could for the most part, right? There was some pressure, but Raleigh hasn't been sacked, and that's a good thing. So how that offensive line blocks Northwestern and kind of sets the tone for moving the ball. Duke's offense has been pretty strong the first few games, so they should be able to put some points on the board against this Northwestern team, and hopefully, you know, from Duke's standpoint, you're playing a team that's in disarray. So if you can get out early and get the lead on them, maybe you can kind of break their spirit and kind of have this game kind of in hand by halftime.
Yeah, no kidding. Find a way to kind of put the pressure on them, right? Start strong on offense, see how Northwestern can respond. We've seen some pretty good games between the two teams the last few seasons. So I'm feeling good about Duke's chances going into the weekend and that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and we'll take our final timeout on today's show. And when we come back, we know basketball is always a favorite thing to discuss there in Durham. We'll have some basketball thoughts with Steve Wiseman after our final break here on the program. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, my favorite sports book, that's for sure. As you can get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. All customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer that you don't want to miss. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. Final few moments here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson alongside my pal Steve Wiseman from the Raleigh News and Observer. Tell me a little bit about your work. Where can we find all your coverage of Duke athletics, Steve?
Yeah, you got my Twitter or X handle, whatever we're calling it these days. Yeah. On the screen there, Steve Wiseman NC is the place to find me there. Newsobserver.com is our website. So yeah, we're covering all three triangle teams, obviously. Duke, Carolina, and State during football season's off to a good start for everybody. And basketball's coming up here. We should have the schedule within a couple of weeks here, I would think. It's about time. Usually we have it by now, right? The ACC basketball schedule.
Right.
They're running a little bit behind. I think they got distracted by maybe what's happening in the following season when the new teams come in. But anyway, so yeah, we'll have some full breakdown of those schedules when they come out and what it's going to mean for everybody. And then, practice starts shortly after that for the season. And there's big things expected for Duke, especially this basketball season.
That's where I was going to go, Steve. I can look at the schedule, and we can do a little math here. It's September 15th and Monday, September 25th. The NCAA lets first day practices be put into place. So here we are. You look at the calendar, 10 days away from the first official practice for Duke basketball going into 2023-2024. How do you think Jon Scheyer feels about his team right now, 10 days away from the season?
Yeah, he feels really good about what he's got. And, the number one concern is Kyle Filipowski getting cleared to go full speed. And, all off season after he had those 2 hip surgeries, we're going to take it easy. It's not a rush. It's July, it's August. Well, now it's September, and we're going to start practicing here in a couple of weeks, and then it's going to be October, and it's going to be time for some games. And they think he's going to be fine, and that's going to make Scheyer feel really good. I mean, Flip's got to adjust to a different defensive position than he was last year. That's going to be something to watch. But they have a really strong backcourt. They have 4 starters back. Great leadership with Jeremy Roach and Ryan Young, so that they're in position to have a really strong season.
Yeah, a lot of people want to talk about Kyle Filipowski because so many folks, I think, were surprised by his decision to come back for another season. People have been able to listen to him speak on the Brotherhood podcast. That's been kind of a fun initiative that Duke has had. Ryan Young and Flip have been kind of swapping seats in that hosting chair duties. But you look at his play, I know people talk about kind of the athleticism, the movement, and that sort of thing after this hip procedure. Another area that we discussed throughout last season would be, Steve, can he get back to a little bit more consistent shooting numbers when you look at his percentages and what kind of an outside threat he can still be for Duke?
And that's important for him, not only for this year, but for going forward as a pro player. If he can up the 3-point shooting, higher than what he's been, what he was last year, get it up in the mid 30s, maybe back to 34, 35%. That'll make him a lottery pick if he can do that. Yeah. And so, and Duke will win a lot of basketball games if he's doing that too. So that's an area I know he's worked on, and I know that he wants to emphasize that he can be better this year.
How should Duke fans, how should Coach Scheyer, how do they feel about 3-point shooting as a whole when you look at this year's squad?
They think they'll be a better 3-point shooting team. Last year they were not very good, as we know. And Roach was out a lot last year. If he can become he kind of is what he is at this point, but if he can be a little better 3-point shooter, they think they're going to get pretty good shooting from some of the guards, from McCain and Foster back there. Proctor kind of came on last year, was a better offensive player at the end of the year than the beginning. So if he takes another big step here in the offseason, he's another guy that if he can prove he can hit open threes, is going to be a high first round draft pick with his game.
Expectations for this Duke team right now, a lot of people have got them. It's either Kansas or Duke, I think, for many, when you look at the top teams in the entire country. A little bit of a different spot than where they were a year ago when we get set for Jon Scheyer into year one. The expectations being placed on this team there's got to be a little bit more confidence knowing that you've got those 4 starters returning, a big veteran voice in the locker room like Ryan Young and that sort of thing, right?
Exactly. And last year, there were only 2 guys back from the Final Four team the year before. So we're in a completely different situation. They've been through a year with Shire. They know what he's like when the bullets are flying, as they say, when it's real. When they went through a tough stretch last year, they came out of it and won 10 games in a row in February and March. So there's a lot of confidence there that, okay, we've got a handle on this, and this is going to be a constant source of concern. But you remember last year what happened with UNC came back with all these guys. They were number 1 and they didn't make the tournament. So Duke doesn't want to be that, right? They try to say we don't worry about the guys down the road, but you don't want to repeat what they did.
Last thought before we get out of here for today, talking about this Duke team again, 10 days away from the start of practice, 10 days away from coaching taking place on the floor. And to that degree, when you look at that Duke bench this season, a couple of new faces that you'll see getting to interact with the squad, and new roles for someone like Will Avery, and then Emmanuel Dildy coming in to join the coaching staff as well. If people haven't gotten a chance to hear your thoughts on sort of the changes to the Duke basketball coaching staff, what do you think of it, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, you hate to see Emil Jefferson go because he was such a strong presence and such a good post coach, because his playing career wasn't that long ago, right? So he can really relate with the guys, and that's why the Celtics took him, right? There's a reason why he's in the NBA, because he was really good. So, but with Dildy, you get a guy with a little more experience, right? So maybe that's a different approach to things. Again, it's somebody coming from the outside, like that worked well with Jay Lucas last year, and so it's a fresh look at things, which always helps. And that's one thing that Shire has not been afraid to do. So, and then of course Will Avery coming into one of those new positions that the NCAA created. The new assistant coaches they're allowed to have. He's been around the program for a few years now in different roles while he was finishing up his degree. He's a guy steeped in the brotherhood, right? So that's all good. And so it's another one of those guys that people can relate to and see. It's just another strong voice. And now he can work with the players on the court where he wasn't allowed to do that before.
Well, we're excited. Basketball season will be here before we know it. We've got countdown to craziness on the horizon. It seems as though there's going to be a lot of high-level recruits set to be in attendance, and we know recruiting never stops. That's for sure. So we'll be following all of it, again, with your coverage there at the Raleigh News and Observer. Steve, as always, it's a pleasure to see you here on the show today. Thank you for stopping by.
Thanks for having me on, JJ.
All right, that's Steve Wiseman joining us here on a Friday edition of Locked on Blue Devils. That's going to do it for our show here today. Thanks so much for watching all week. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and on the Apple Podcast platform. We'll talk to you next week. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.